Hi students, and welcome to today's lesson. I'm Mrs. Fife. Today we will investigate how can wind affect land. Are you ready? Grab your pencil and your science journal and let's get started. Let's travel back to Egypt to look again at the Great Sphinx of Giza that we saw in the last lesson. In 1857, the Sphinx was buried in the sand. But in this picture, we can see most of the Sphinx. What caused this change? We know that many people worked hard to dig the Sphinx out, but how did it get buried in the first place? Last time we made our claim, wind can change land. Then we decided we needed to investigate so we could collect strong evidence to support the claim. Are you ready? Let's start investigating. Remember our investigation procedures from the last lesson? We will need to observe the land materials and then cover the bin with plastic wrap. Then we will insert the tip of the balloon pump into the hole and pump 25 to 30 times. Finally, we will observe the land materials again and record our observations. This investigation will help us look for evidence that wind changes land materials. Will the wind change the shape of all three materials in the same way? What do you think? I'm not sure, but we will find out. Where should we start? Let's start with gravel. What do you notice? I notice that the gravel is made of small rocks, and the rocks are in a pile. What do you predict will happen to the gravel when we add air to the model? Do you think the air will have an effect on the gravel? Raise your hand if you think it will. I covered the bin with plastic wrap. Now, let's watch what happens. Wow! Look at the wind move the plastic on top of the bin. It's hard to see if the gravel is moving though. Let's try looking closer. Now, look at the gravel. What do you notice? Did anything change? Point to where you see change happening. Let's look at our results after blowing the air. What do you notice? Did you notice that some of the gravel pieces moved, but not many of them? I also noticed that the shape of the pile of gravel did not change much. The next step in our procedure is to record our observations on our chart. Here are the two piles of gravel, one before blowing air and one after blowing air. Before blowing the air, we noticed that the gravel was made of small rocks and the rocks were in a pile. After blowing the air, we noticed only a few pieces of gravel moved and the shape of the pile did not change. Are you ready to see what happens to the soil? First, let's observe the soil. What do you notice? I notice that the soil forms a small hill. Do you think the air will change the soil? If yes, raise your hand. Do you think the air will change the soil more than it changed the gravel? If yes, raise your hand even higher. Let's find out. Remember, step 2 says to cover the bin with plastic wrap, so I did that first. Okay, here we go. Whoa, do you see that? Some of the soil blows all the way across the bin. It sure does move more easily than the gravel. So, what does this test tell us about how wind affects soil? Well, the air moves some of the soil from one place to another. The air moves more soil than gravel. What else do you notice? Do you notice the pile of soil is smaller? Let's add our observations about soil to our chart. We compared the soil before blowing air to the soil after blowing air. Let's record our observations. Some soil moved and spread across the bin. The pile of soil is smaller. Wow, we gathered a lot of evidence today. We saw that the air can move pieces of gravel and soil to new places. We also found out that the air did not affect these two materials in the same way. The soil moved more than the gravel did. Do you think we have enough evidence to support our claim that wind can change land? The land around the Sphinx is sandy. And remember, we want to understand what caused the sand to bury the Sphinx. So I think we need to investigate with sand. In our next lesson, we will try the same investigation with sand. What do you think might happen?
Hi students, and welcome to today's lesson. I'm Mr. Hunter. Today, we will investigate the question, how can wind affect land? Are you ready? Grab your pencil and your science journal, and let's get started. Imagine you are standing outside on a windy day. Feel the wind on your face. Feel the wind blow your hair around. Look around. What else is the wind blowing? Maybe a flag waves in the wind, or maybe your ball blows past you. And hey, is the soil blowing in the wind? Remember, we want to understand if wind caused the Sphinx to be buried in sand. Did the wind change the land around the Sphinx? In the last lesson, we observed wind move gravel and soil. Today, we will finish our investigation by observing sand. Do you remember the procedure we followed last time? We will follow the same procedure today. We will observe the land materials, then cover the bin with plastic wrap. We will insert the tip of the balloon pump into the hole and pump air into the bin 25 to 30 times. And finally, we will observe the land materials and record our observations. Let's start. First, we will observe the sand before we add the air. What do you notice? I notice the sand is in a pile. It looks like a little hill. How do you think the wind will affect the sand? Do you think the wind will cause a change to the shape of the sand? If yes, raise your hand. Do you think the wind will cause a bigger change to the shape of the sand than it did to the shape of the gravel and soil? If yes, raise your hand super high. I covered the bin with plastic wrap. Next, I will create the wind. Get ready. The sand is hard to see, but I can see some movement. Can you? Did the shape of the sand change? Did any sand move? What do you think? Let's start with the shape of the sand. What changed? Wow, I can tell there's some change, but it's really hard to tell. Let's take the plastic wrap off and look at a view from above. Wow, where's the sand now in the bin? All the sand moved over here. So did it affect the shape of the sand too? It did! The land looks flatter. We compared the sand before blowing air and after blowing air. Now we can record our observations of the sand after blowing the air. What did we observe? We observed that a lot of sand spread out and covered the bottom of the bin. We also observed that the pile of sand is flatter. So how does the evidence we found in our investigation support our claim that wind can change land? Well, we observed that blowing air on the gravel, soil, and sand made them all move. The soil and sand moved more than the gravel. So did the wind change the shape of all three materials in the same way? What did we observe? We observed that the pile of soil got smaller and the pile of sand got flatter. The pile of gravel did not really change. So we observed that the shape of the soil and sand changed more than the shape of the gravel. The land did not all change in the same way. Our observations show us that wind can change land by moving it somewhere else, and wind can change the shape of land. This evidence supports our claim that wind can change land. Let's think about Egypt and the Sphinx again. Maybe we can find out now what happened to the Sphinx. We will use our evidence from the book World Traveler, The Sphinx, and evidence from our investigations to help explain what happened to the Sphinx. Let's start with our book. Without the sand to hide it, the stone is at risk. Wind and sand chip at it. Chunks fall off. Craftsmen tend to it. They want it to last. Well, the book says that wind and sand chip at the Sphinx today. So the wind is moving sand around the Sphinx. Do you think the wind caused the Sphinx to get buried in the sand? Give me a thumbs up if you think the wind blew the sand onto the Sphinx. And let's look at our model. How does our model help us understand what happened? Our model supports the information in the book. We saw how wind can blow sand around, so maybe wind blew sand all around the Sphinx a long time ago. What do you think? Over time, wind could have moved enough sand to bury the Sphinx up to its neck. But burying the Sphinx so deep took a very large amount of sand. I'm sure people are very happy that the sand was removed from the Sphinx. Now they can enjoy the statue again. How might the changes wind makes to land cause problems for people? What do you think? Well, if wind could bury buildings like it buried the Sphinx, that change could be a problem for people. Or a strong wind might push big rocks over, and that change could be dangerous if the rocks fell near people or houses. In the next lesson, we'll continue to explore the question, how can wind change land? We will look at how people solve problems caused by the wind. Let's review your tasks for today. First, use observations to support the claim that wind can change land. Second, summarize what you learned about the changing shape of land in this lesson. Thanks for joining me on today's journey as we explored how wind affects land. Your task for today is to complete Lesson 11B Science Journal. I'll see you next time.